Welcome to Trio Maryland's August monthly meeting. I'm Marty Marin, and this is my wife, Michelle, and we manage Trio Maryland. We'd like to welcome all our members and guests this morning, and we really want to thank you for attending. Today's topic is a really great topic, family dynamics and communications throughout the transplant process. Our speaker is Faith Osborne. She's from the Gift of Life Family House, where she's the social worker in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And for your information, we will not be doing our usual Saturday morning meeting next month, but we are be conducting our half-day virtual transplant conference. It'll be on September 17th from 9 to 1. And if you go to the website, you'll be able to register for the event at www.triomaryland.org.
Today's speaker is Faith Osborne, and she is from the Gift of Life Family House, social worker there. Faith graduated from Bloomsburg University with a Bachelor of Social Work degree and from Westchester University to earn her Master of Social Work. During Faith's undergraduate clinical experience, she interned with a transplant team at Geisinger Medical Center in Danville, Pennsylvania. This experience spurred her desire to work with transplant patients and their families. Faith also has experience as a substance use counselor and case management advocate with HIV and AIDS patients in Philadelphia. She has a passion for travel and has participated in medical mission trips in underdeveloped communities. Now she's a Philadelphian, and she is enjoying her new home in the city and has sadly converted to being an Eagles fan. So please welcome Faith.
Hello and good morning. Thank you so much, Michelle and Marty. And thank you everyone for having me here today and for participating. So again, my name is Faith and I am one of the social workers at the Gift of Life Howie's House, formerly known as the Gift of Life Family House. So if I slip up, please forgive me. So before we get into any of our content today, I just wanted to start by sharing a little bit about the Gift of Life Donor Program. For those of you who don't know, we are my region's OPO, so that is Eastern PA, Southern New Jersey, and all of Delaware. And we are actually one of the first OPOs in the country and the largest OPO in the country right now. And we are fortunate enough to be in one of the most generous regions in the country. Last year, coordinating the highest numbers of donors in the US at 705 and 1,700 organs transplanted. And today we'll be talking a lot about pre and post-transplant patients and families, but I always think it's just important to just recognize this wild number of those being added and waiting on the transplant wait list right now, that number being 105,000. So again, I am at the Gift of Life Howie's House, which is located in Philadelphia, PA, and we are an affiliate of the Gift of Life Donor Program. So we are a home away from home for transplant patients and their families. We provide temporary and affordable lodging and supportive services for those who travel to Philly for their transplant-related care. So we partner with 8 hospitals, 8 transplant units in Philadelphia, and we support anyone pre or post-transplant, so anywhere from evaluation to the life of your transplant. And what brings us here together is the Caregiver Lifeline program. So this was developed when the house was opened, and this is our way to support families who might not necessarily stay at the family house. So whether they are local to Philly or belong to another OPO region, we wanted to find a way to support and provide resources for families nationwide. So this is an actual QR code. If you'd like to scan it, it'll take you right to our website where you can find our information. And this next slide is an example of some online education we have. So we also host some webinars, and they are recorded and listed on our website, and they're organized by pre and post-transplant. So if you're looking for some additional support, you can find that there, as well as our online Zoom support group. So these are a smaller, more intimate support group for emotional support of both patients and caregivers. So again, these QR codes, if you scan on your phone right on the screen, will take you to our website where you can register for these monthly virtual support groups. So this is open to anyone, regardless of if you have or will stay at the family house. You are able and encouraged to participate in these support groups. So I'll leave that up for a second if anyone would like to scan. And I'm happy to provide these links to anyone as well if you miss them. And then some just upcoming events. Lastly, myself and Jess Cooper, who is a lung transplant social worker at Penn Hospital, will be discussing the topic of transplant's influence on self-image and self-esteem, which is a really important topic. And that will be on August 24th. So again, that QR code here on the screen can be scanned for that. And our next in September will be Dr. Anesi, who will be talking about COVID-19 in relation to transplant. So really informative and helpful information for anyone curious about some transplant-specific COVID-19 updates. Great. So we will get into it. And again, this topic today of family dynamics and communication is something that at the house is brought up to me a lot by both patients and families as something that they have experienced and found as a challenge and obstacle throughout this journey. So today, this space will be exploring the changes in dynamics and communication throughout this process, kind of understanding some factors that influence those changes throughout both the transplant process as well as the additional layer of COVID-19, and then just some skills to integrate healthy communication and boundaries throughout the transplant process. So before we get started, I encourage you throughout this discussion to utilize the chat to talk amongst yourselves and share any thoughts or experiences. But before we get started, I'd love to just hear a simple yes or no response in the chat. And Michelle and Marty, I don't know if you have an eye on the chat. I don't know if I can access it right now. But again, just a simple yes or no question of, have you noticed changes or challenges in communication or family dynamics with your loved ones since beginning the transplant process? And it looks like I do have access to the chat, so this is perfect. So go ahead and share, and then just take a look at other people's responses and shared experiences. So I am seeing a lot of yeses. I am seeing some no's, so that's really wonderful. And I'd love to hear if you are just beginning the transplant process or what practices you are currently utilizing to maintain your relationships. So I'm seeing some more yeses rolling in, so that's to be expected and completely valid. Okay. So let's first review why family dynamics might change throughout the transplant process. And this will look different for everyone and often will look different at different stages of the transplant process. So this will likely change for you and might change multiple times throughout the process. So as we know, stress impacts a lot of both our physical and emotional wellness and is largely influencing how we communicate with one another. So how we communicate can directly impact the way our family unit kind of functions in our dynamic. Also, the roles that in the relationship might change as you kind of shift into either your role of patient, your role of caregiver, and as you kind of integrate into those roles, as well as the responsibilities that come along with those roles. Interactions is something we're going to touch on a lot today. So the way that you interacted before your transplant journey may have felt normal, or kind of like you're in a normal routine. And since transplant, things in your family unit might feel a bit more medical, might feel very task-oriented or transplant-related. And finally, boundaries. So the boundaries that we have to set in our family unit to kind of maintain some balance. And again, if anyone has any thoughts or questions throughout the discussion, please put them in the chat, and we'll answer them all at the end. Okay, so to visualize this a bit better, some specific examples through the transplant process. So your family dynamic, the role that you're in. So prior to transplant, your primary role may have been spouse, child, parent, etc. You might feel like that role has suddenly reversed while starting transplant or through your transplant journey. We see this a lot with adult children who are now starting to care for their parents who might be the patient. Another example is your responsibilities. So prior to transplant, you may have never managed things like your family's finances. And now suddenly you might be solely responsible for that without having time to really learn that or prep for that. And finally, again, those interactions. So prior to transplant, we mentioned how things day to day may have felt like you're in a good groove or routine. They may have, again, felt normal. And things now might feel like all of your interactions with your family or your loved ones are very medical or treatment oriented. So again, in the chat, if you can relate to any of these, if these sound familiar, please feel free to put that in the chat, or if there are any other examples that you kind of pop into your mind that you think of within your family dynamic. So at all stages of the transplant process, there are going to be factors that continue to influence the dynamic and communication within your family. These could be cognitive, emotional, physical, which, as we know, that increased stress can directly impact the way that we interact with one another and how our family unit interacts. So pre-transplant, again, these can be relative to patients and caregivers, but they might look a little different for both of you. So pre-transplant, this might look like, again, integrating into those new roles, experiencing fear for the unknown. Transplant is an experience and a journey that has a lot of unknowns, as well as loss. So these, we like to refer to them as non-death losses. So maybe you're mourning the person that you were prior to transplant, whether that be how you identified, how you viewed yourself, or what you were physically able to do, as well as new burdens and stressors that come from being on the wait list, going through evaluation, all of the appointments you're going to, which all of these factors directly impacting your emotional and physical health. So we know that how we feel emotionally and physically often influences how we act towards those around us. So post-transplant, a lot of these factors might remain the same. However, they might just look a little different now post-transplant. So you're once again reintegrating into a new role of someone who's waiting for a transplant to someone who just received a transplant or is a post-transplant patient 5 years out. Your routines are once again going to change, whether that looks like different appointment schedules, different medication schedules, as well as continued burden and stressors that might just look a little bit different. So we know as we enter any new or challenging experience, we continue to have stressors. They just might look a little different now. Medication, so like we said, that might be medication schedules and also medication side effects. I think something we don't talk about enough is those side effects that come from the medications and how they can really impact our stress levels as well as the way that we interact with one another. One example of that is fatigue. And then again, our emotional health, so how we are emotionally and mentally processing this huge experience and major life change, as well as survivor's guilt is something that we see from both patients and caregivers at some point throughout the post-transplant process, is that guilt and almost a little bit of grief for the donor and their loved ones. So some additional stressors that throughout transplant, as well as this additional layer of COVID-19, if you are someone that is going through the transplant process during COVID, you're going to identify some additional stressors. So this might be limited resources or support. So things that you have access to or people in your support system that you might no longer have access to or as much access to. Some additional fear and anger. So just like we reviewed earlier, but that additional layer and piece of the unknown of transplant and now the unknown of COVID-19. We saw a lot of routines changing, what we're able to do, how we're able to do it. And then again, the emotional health and mental health that comes from all of the stress from COVID-19, and then financial loss. So whether it's the patient or the caregiver or your loved ones, maybe careers might look a little different, access might look a little different, which is definitely something that can impact your family and their dynamic. So we've so far reviewed the shift in family dynamics throughout transplant and COVID. So we're now going to focus primarily on how we communicate with one another during this process. So another opportunity to hear from all of you, I'd love to hear in the chat, and I'll keep an eye on it. These are just a few specific examples, but again, please share if you have another one that sticks out to you. Which piece of your transplant journey is most likely to lead to confrontation with your loved ones? So whether you are a patient or a caregiver, do any of these kind of hold that place as the main point of confrontation? So that could be medication compliance, household responsibilities, medical appointments, or again, if there is something that you think right off the top of your head, this part of the transplant process or COVID is our main point of confrontation or conversation. So I'm seeing any non-compliance issues were an issue. Household responsibilities and appointments. So really it sounds like juggling all of these things. Someone else shared the medical appointments, pulling my child away from life experiences to get the care that they need. So absolutely, all of these responsibilities and expectations throughout the transplant process is something that is necessary, but something that does absolutely take time away from spending time with family or other life experiences that might be going on during that time. Someone else shared a lack of control. So I'd imagine that this could, mean lack of control of the situation, which again, we talked about the unknown of transplant and the feeling of a little bit of lack of control. Absolutely. Someone else shared medical appointments. Someone shared that they were newly married and then husband became their caregiver. So absolutely, the shift in dynamic and shift in roles can be greatly impacted through this transplant process. Thank you all so much for sharing, and please continue to put these in the chat and talk amongst yourselves and recognize these shared experiences. Okay, so some common changes in communication. We know that when emotions and stress are high, it is not uncommon to have a difficult time communicating effectively. So because of these changes, it's important to recognize this and take extra steps to make sure that we are working on our communication. So shifts in communication can look different for everyone, and again, will likely change throughout different stages of the transplant process. So these changes could present in many ways, but two main ways might look like the communication content. So again, I mentioned before that these conversations with your loved ones are going to or might be primarily transplant or health related. So it might feel like every conversation you have with your loved one anymore is pertaining to either your roles, the tasks you have to get done, appointments, expectations, and then could also present as communication frequency. So you might have to increase your communication if you need feedback, if you need additional support, if you have a lot of questions or concerns together about medication, schedules. It could also decrease. So if you think about a time when you weren't feeling well, if you were feeling sick or overwhelmed or emotionally drained, it may have been likely that you decreased or internalized a little bit and weren't as open to having conversations with your loved ones. So why can't we just roll with these punches and kind of adapt and communicate properly or effectively throughout this new experience? And it is because there are many barriers to good communication that we face throughout the transplant process. So again, these are some examples that transplant families and patients have expressed to me, is primarily the change in health. So depending on the health status or the medical status, it might make it more difficult to communicate. And again, this could be the side effects of medications. If you are overworked, if you're tired, you might experience a short temper, and those emotional changes. Also, the communication styles of others is something to take into consideration. So we'll talk more specifically about those communication styles, but one example being if you are a passive communicator and your partner is more aggressive when they're overwhelmed, this might increase some conflict or tension in trying to communicate. As well as insecurity. So if there is a lack of confidence in either how to effectively communicate your needs, or maybe a fear of how someone might receive what you have to tell them, this can make it more difficult to open that line of communication. And then finally, fatigue and burnout. So again, if we are not feeling well and feeling very fatigued or at the point of caregiver burnout or patient burnout, we are going to, our communication is going to be less of a priority. Some more specific barriers to communication throughout COVID might be the types of interactions that we're having. So as we all see here, our interactions are likely going to be less in-person interactions and might look like more virtual or over the phone. So whether this be with your medical team, with your extended caregivers, with your family members, we're going to have that limited nonverbal communication. So whether this be masks, or again, not being able to pick up on nonverbal cues over the phone or over Zoom. This is definitely going to create an additional layer and an additional barrier to our communication. Again, as well as access. So we might not have access to our resources or our tools for healthy communication. And again, just that additional layer of emotional health and challenges that COVID creates, making it difficult to communicate. So we touched, again, referring back to some communication styles. So there are 4 general communication styles, 3 of which are less effective styles. So as I'm going through these, I want you to do some self-reflection and think, when I am stressed or overwhelmed, which of these do I find myself leaning towards a little bit more? You could also think about your loved ones and which they tend to lean towards. And it's very natural to have shifts in communication styles throughout any difficult or challenging situation. So the first of the 3 ineffective communication styles being passive. So this might be a disregard for your own needs, failing to express your honest thoughts or feelings. And this might look like someone that is overly apologetic or goes silent in either conflict or fear of communication. The second, more ineffective communication style being aggressive. So this looks like disregarding others' needs, opinions, or feelings. And someone who is an aggressive communicator might look demanding, hostile, or abrasive. And then finally, passive aggressive. So this is someone that appears passive on the surface, but is often acting out of anger in a more indirect way. So someone that is communicating in a passive aggressive style might seem a bit sarcastic. So again, to visualize this relative to the transplant process, someone that is a passive communicator might express, "I'm so sorry to bother you, but could you maybe try to be ready to leave for appointments on time today?" Aggressive might sound like, "If you don't get in the car, I'm going to lose it. You have made us late so many times already." And passive aggressive might sound like, "Wow, I wonder what it's like to be on time." So if any of those sound familiar, those are some 3 more ineffective communication styles that, again, it is very easy to slip into when we're experiencing all of these factors throughout transplant. So what can we do to kind of combat these barriers as we go and make modifications to practice better communication? Because it sounds like a very overwhelming task to kind of fix communication with my loved ones. So a good first step is kind of identifying what a healthy communication and what a healthy relationship looks like for your family. So these are just some examples. Again, it'll look different to your family units and what your needs are. So identifying trust and mutual support, creating an honest and safe space could be an example of this. And this is something that kind of can be identified as part of your treatment plan or your treatment goals. Just like you take medications every day, you go to the appointment as scheduled. This is just as important for your transplant journey to have these healthy relationships and this support, that it should be added to your list every day of things that we're working on or things that we need to build into our treatment plan. So some action steps towards these healthy practices might look like active listening and communicating emotions, setting boundaries, and taking breaks. And we will get specific into what that looks like in a second, but also seeking individual or group support. So this can be really helpful for your communication and relationships if there are certain things that you and your loved ones just are not able not in a place where you are able to communicate about that yet. So having a third party to process these things with, and then come back and work on your communication with your loved ones. Also, groups, as you all see here, are really helpful to talk to others who understand what you might be going through, or have had similar experiences with their loved ones throughout the transplant process. So again, breaking down these skills, first is active listening. So in order for someone to feel like they are being heard, you first have to listen and focus. So there are 3 components to active listening. The first being listening, restating, reflecting, and clarifying, and validating. So listening sounds like very common knowledge. We can listen to someone speaking to us, but active listening takes into consideration that we are listening without focusing on what can I say next, or how can I solve this problem? How am I going to respond? And if you find yourself doing this while you're listening to someone, it's important to reflect on that, take notice of that, and step back and really try to focus in on the present moment and what they're saying. This can be very challenging and takes a lot of practice, and can even be something that you express to your loved ones by saying that I'm trying to work on my active listening when you're speaking to me. If I pause after you express something to me, know that it's because I'm trying to listen to what you're saying rather than focusing on my next comment. The next being restating, reflecting, and clarifying. So this allows them to know that you are hearing what they're saying. And this can be as simple as stating what they said back to you by saying, it sounds like I hear you saying this. So it sounds like I hear you saying you are frustrated. And just allowing them to know that you hear what I'm saying, you're listening to me. And finally, validating. So this allows them to know that they are being heard and understood. So even if you don't necessarily agree with what they are saying, validation can be a place to kind of say, I'm sorry that this is your experience, or I can imagine that this is a common experience. So again, even if you're not necessarily agreeing with them, you're still validating their emotions and what they're feeling. And finally, getting back to our communication styles, our 4th and most effective communication style being assertive communication. So assertive communication allows us to be a good active listener while also getting our needs and wants across. So assertive listening or assertive communication is respectful. It utilizes active listening. It allows you to stand up again for what your needs are while still being mindful of what your loved one's needs are. And an example, again, referring back to transplant specific, might look like, I'm sorry that you're feeling tired today, but it's important for me that we are on time to your appointments. If we're late again, I'll be late for work, and you might not get the amount of time with your transplant team that you need to best recover. So our next step was setting boundaries. And I hear a lot of times from families that I know I need to set boundaries. Boundaries are clearly crossed here, but how do I do that? What is the step-by-step of setting boundaries? So the first step might be defining what the boundary is. So taking a look at what your roles and responsibilities are, what you're okay with, and what you are not okay with, and setting very clear limits. This might look like practicing saying no if a boundary has been set and crossed, utilizing the word no, and expressing what you're not okay with. Finally, or next, setting consequences and taking breaks. So what's going to happen if those boundaries are set and they are crossed? And taking breaks might look like stepping back from a situation if it is not productive. So if you're in a conversation with a loved one and it's no longer healthy or productive, taking a step back and saying, we need to step back and cool down. Let's address this later when we've both had a minute to think and calm down a little bit. And I think communicating that is a huge step of saying, I'm not walking away from this conversation to avoid the conversation. I think it would just be better and more productive if we take a break and cool off. And finally, communicating the importance and purpose of the boundary. So all of this, all of these skills and all of these steps, the purpose of this is to develop and maintain those healthy relationships. So we are doing this, we are setting these boundaries and having these difficult conversations because we want to maintain our relationship and we want to support your transplant journey or my transplant journey. And finally, why are we taking all of these steps? What is the importance of finding healthy dynamics and communication? So primarily managing stress. We know that stress has such an impact on our emotional health, on our physical health, and managing this stress by healthy communication and setting these boundaries within our family dynamics can help to avoid things like burnout and support our overall wellness. It also helps to increase our levels of self-esteem within relationships and within the way that we communicate. So if you are confident in the way that you communicate or respond, that influences how others behave around you or the attitudes that they have towards you. And like someone said earlier, there's a lot we can't control throughout this transplant process. So allowing yourself a sense of control in how you can react to someone or how someone communicates with you can really increase your sense of self-confidence and control. And finally, once again, creating and maintaining healthy relationships. So this can help to create consistency within your family dynamic, as well as support in problem solving and decision making throughout your transplant journey. So overall, healthy communication is a critical piece in managing all of these changes throughout transplant within both your family dynamics, the way you communicate, and really balancing stress from all of these changes throughout the transplant process. Okay, so I see some comments in the chat, so I will go ahead and read through those. Thank you all so much for your engagement and for listening. I'll go ahead and stop sharing so we can see each other. So I'll just start reading through these, Michelle and Marty. If you saw any, please let me know.
Okay.
So I'm seeing most of these are a lot of really great responses to those chat questions. I'm really glad that you guys participated and engaged in those. I do see a question, what's the difference between someone listening versus hearing? It's also important not to interrupt while practicing active listening. That is a really wonderful point, that it's challenging not to want to talk above someone and interrupt them when they're speaking, because often these challenging conversations are ones that we feel very passionately about and are often with those who are closest to us. So we feel almost more comfortable in talking over them or interrupting them. And I think that these skills of taking breaks and stepping back are a good kind of first step to practice that skill. And it's also important to remember that a lot of these can seem very overwhelming. So maybe this looks like taking it step by step, starting with taking breaks or starting with active listening, whatever that looks like for you. And then the other question of that was, what is the difference between listening and hearing? And that's a wonderful question as well. And I think to follow up on the active listening skills, so there definitely is a difference between just listening to someone and showing that you're listening and hearing them. So practicing skills like clarifying or validating, allowing them to know that I'm listening to you, but I'm also hearing what you're saying. And I'm validating that, and here's my follow-up, here's my response. Someone else also mentioned it's also important to pay attention to body language while listening. That's very important. Body language is something that a lot of us utilize to express how we're feeling if it's something that's really difficult to express. So if we're frustrated or if we really are trying to make a point, I know I'll talk with my hands. I want your attention, listen. So that's an example of some body language that if someone's not listening to me or hearing me, they might see my body language and say, okay, let me double in here. So body language is very important. One example that I always think of when you're trying to communicate with someone and maybe come off a little bit softer if it's a hard conversation or not as intimidating is the way where we place our hands or our arms. So a lot of people, especially if we're standing, it's very natural to want to cross our arms or put them on our hips just because that's what's natural and that's what feels good. And it's also feels like a little bit of a security, but it often comes off as a little bit intimidating. So hand placement or arm placement can be a very helpful piece of nonverbal. So maybe placing them at your side, or if you're sitting on your lap, kind of opening the conversation and coming from a less intimidating perspective.
Someone also made the point about learning, I think it was Milton, about not interrupting, practice that paying attention and listening. I know all of us get so anxious to say what's on our mind, and some of us think, oh, I'm going to forget it if I don't say it right now, but then we don't end up letting our partner finish their thought and what they were saying to us. And it appears then that you're not giving them the attention, you're not giving weight to what they're saying. And that can, I think, sometimes cause disruption too in communication.
Absolutely. And I worked with a family previously who had that same concern. And the patient had said, I don't want to keep interrupting them. I know that I do this, but I genuinely don't want to forget what I'm trying to say to them. I want to get my point across because I don't want to forget if I told you this, if I didn't, if I said this. So they started journaling either before, during, or after these conversations of these are the things that I need to express right now that are important to me, whether that be something treatment oriented, like did we take this medication today? Or do I have this appointment today? Writing it down and maybe having that in a shared space of these are the things that I want to communicate. Did we address this? Is this good? And then everybody's kind of on the same page. Same with having a shared schedule, maybe in a mutual place with everyone's tasks and appointments and things. So maybe you have a calendar on the kitchen fridge. And that is really helpful for her, including time if the patient or caregiver or whoever needs some personal alone time. So if you need some self-care time, put it on the schedule so everybody knows. And that's a really great way to kind of integrate into or out of the roles that you're in by scheduling time for yourself and for me time and us time.
I think that's a great suggestion. I think that would really be helpful. And Yvonne had mentioned about the importance of eye contact. And I think today things are harder for some people because they always have their phone in their hand. And they're always, so, their phone makes noises. They think, oh my, that's something important. I need to check it. And so they're not looking at who's addressing them. They're worried about their phone. And that can really be disruptive when you're trying to have a conversation, especially about something important.
Yeah, and I hear a lot, especially pre-transplant patients who are waiting for the potential call for transplant, that my phone is my literal lifeline right now. I can't be without my phone. So the suggestion of maybe at dinner time, we put our phones away, they don't feel like that could work from them. So I have known families that have made specific ringtones for their transplant center or their transplant coordinator, so that if the phone is in the other room at dinner time, but they hear that ringtone, bets are off, go answer your phone. So thinking about tips like that and having those conversations when is a big balance of knowing that our phones are important, but they do take up a lot of our relationship and interaction time. So finding a way that works for you to take a break together with the phones and either spend time together or have those important conversations.
Sam Day called that phone jail, when you put the phone, I guess, in the other room.
Yes.
So put it out of sight. I hear a lot of people talking about that, but I've never ever been anywhere where someone actually does that, says, okay, everybody put their phones away. I just think it was so tough these past 2 years for, my husband, Marty, he had his transplant 12 and a half years ago. So yeah, we had to deal with all the transplant stuff that everyone's mentioned, but we didn't have to deal with the COVID piece. So, these last 2.5 years, people kind of had the double whammy of adjusting to all the things they needed to with their transplant, but then factoring in all the COVID restrictions and precautions. So I'm sure that was really very stressful to keep things balanced.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That balance, I think, has been such a buzzword through COVID. But seems, so challenging to do. So I think that's what makes these conversations that much more important, and just trying to be open and transparent while having these conversations. And I think it's very challenging, especially when we're in fear of rocking the boat at home or with whoever it might be. These challenging conversations or implementing balance or implementing new rules or standards, it can be fearful, and rocking the boat is a common fear. But what's the alternative if we don't rock the boat? Resentment, emotional health, whatever that might be for your family.
Are there any other questions or comments?
I have a war story, if I could. Those of you who have partners and have a family, I feel so jealous of you, because I'm the end of my line. I no longer have a sister or a father. That was the last of it. And when I went through my transplant, my advocate was really somebody who had a transplant 5 years before, and they went through with it. There's where your empathy is, because she had already gone through it. And I listened to what she was saying. There was my communication. So here's my little war story. My partner's sister is a dialysis patient for the first time. She started last Monday. And he wanted to see her because she was coming from Ocala, Florida. And he thinks he'll probably never see her again, because that's a long trip to make it from Virginia down to Florida. So she came up to Waldorf, Maryland to be with her daughter. And she told us about it. She showed us the port that she had, and she looked very depressed. When I told her I had a heart transplant, she suddenly looked up. She asked all kinds of questions. She wanted to know what I went through. I wanted to know what she was going through. And there was our connection. Here was something where both of us had this connection. And my boyfriend said, that was the greatest thing in the world, is that she had a chance to speak to somebody who had lived through this already, had gone through it. Even though she's going through dialysis, she's on a kidney transplant list, but she knew what I had gone through. So when you think of family dynamics, because I wasn't going to attend this, I said, well, family dynamics, I don't even have a family, but all of us can be families to anyone who has gone through what you've gone through. It's important for us to share our stories for those who are just starting out on this. It's critical. It's a wealth of information for them. Listening to her, I found out that for those of you who are kidney people who have gone through dialysis, apparently dialysis rooms are very cold. For those of you who are kidney people, I assume that's the case. So I'm going to send her one of those sweaters that have a zipper down the side so that she can still keep warm and have a hood and everything. Those little things really mean a lot to them, that they know that you're thinking about them. And I'm also giving her some CDs, because I heard dialysis takes about 3 or 4 hours, so at least she'll have something to listen to. You need somebody who understands, who's been there. This isn't, and sometimes family doesn't get it, but definitely we're real a wealth of information because we've gone through it. Don't lose sight of the fact of what you can do ourselves as family to somebody else who's not necessarily came out of the same womb. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Gwen.
Thank you so much, Gwen. I think it's really important to highlight the fact that these discussions can be anyone in your support system, whatever your family dynamic looks like, whatever your support system is. It's so important to have those connections. And I think you sharing your impact on someone just again brings to light how important it can be to receive that support when you are on the other end, and share your story and your experiences when things are going well for you. So even if you belong to a support group community and you feel that things are going really well for you and you might not need to participate today, you never know who needs to hear your story and your experiences and can be so clearly moved like she was by you and your experience. So thank you for sharing that with us.
Hello,
Hi.
my name is Kevin, and I got my transplant on May the 1st. I feel like a newbie.
Oh, wow. Congratulations.
Because I was on dialysis for 14 months. I did the peritoneal. So another friend of mine, he's on dialysis. I know about the cold rooms and all that kind of stuff. But unfortunately for him, he wanted to do the peritoneal, but where he lived wasn't set up to deal with all that. So I feel very fortunate. So I got it on May the 1st. And the issue that I'm still dealing with is when I came out of the surgery the next day, I thought I had a brace on my leg, but what happened was the retractor that they used to do the surgery with, I guess, at the kidney end, it had sat like 7 hours on a nerve. So I've been dealing with nerve pain since that time. And I've gone through all kinds of stuff. So I'm about to now get something put in to the nerve. I think it's a nerve blocker, I believe is what it is. But I guess the frustrating thing for me a little bit is that I'm a very, very active person out in the community and everything else. And then, I went in thinking that I'll get this kidney and whatever it takes, get through that, I'll get them then to kind of back out to what I'm doing. But the unfortunate thing is I think the kidney's doing great, at least that's what they're telling me. But the challenge is for me the nerve pain. So that's what I'm dealing with at the moment. And it's actually gotten better because I guess for me, if they had just originally shared with me, I'm like this. Don't sugarcoat anything for me. Just be very, very straight up about everything. That's I could kind of take it better that way. So I think what happened was they kept me in the hospital for 11 days, and I think they were hoping that by that time that the nerve pain may have just subsided or gotten better, but it hadn't. So I went through the physical therapy and the occupational therapy and all that kind of stuff. And I'm at a point in time now where It has gotten better. Now, had they told me this instead of just saying 2 weeks, they said, normally, Kevin, it doesn't happen very often. Every now and then we get somebody that, goes through it and it happens. And it can last maybe 2 weeks, a month. I said, okay. So mentally, I said to myself, well, I got 2 weeks to a month. Well, when that month rolled around and I was still in excruciating pain, I said, not quite. So then the next time it was, well, we don't know how long it could take. It could take as little as, a couple months, it could be a year, whatever. I said, okay, fine. Had they shared that with me at the beginning, mentally, it would have been more for me to grasp as opposed to saying 2 weeks, whatever, it's going to be fine. And it also brought back another issue with me. Back in 2010, I got a spinal fusion surgery. 5 discs were replaced. In that situation, when I woke up, I saw these doctors all around me. They said, Mr. Clemens, we need you to move your right hand. So I said, okay. I moved my right hand. He says, now we need you to move your left one. I said, my left one isn't moving. Same thing happened. So when he walked in, and the first thing out of his mouth was, when I got the kidney transplant, made it first says, well, Mr. Clemens, you're kind of a big guy. And, sometimes when we operate, we have to do a little thing and cut a little deep through more tissue. I said, I told myself, oh shit, this sounds familiar. And same scenario, different situation, but still the nerve pain is there. And it's gotten better. But it's like now I go on the 29th of this month to address that. And the other thing too is I'm still going through the different tacrolimus for the anti-rejection medication. Right now I'm going through like little tremors because we're still trying to regulate it. It's up and down. So dealing with that's a little uncomfortable for me dealing with that too, because I noticed that I was holding my cup and the cup's just shaking. I go, wow, that's not nice. That's not good. So there's a whole lot of things that when you've never had it before. The other thing too is I'm also taking insulin 4 times a day because of the prednisone. I've been a diabetic since 1999 and have never taken anything until this happened. It was all diet and exercise. So that's a whole new transition as well. So there's a lot of things going on. And it's like, I thank God that I have some friends of mine that have been through dialysis that have helped me. And one of those my college roommates, so he kind of shares stuff with me too. But I mean, it's just a fact sometimes. I can imagine if you've gone through that stuff and you don't really know what to do when those things are happening, who to call, who to reach out to. Because I'm one of those individuals, I don't mind calling anybody, asking anything. I don't care how dumb the question is, because I'm also a big advocate about this. No matter how dumb you may feel that it is, still ask the question anyway, because somebody could probably use the information. But that's kind of where I am right now. I got pretty decent family support. And what's interesting, I know the woman that spoke before about her family. I know about my family. I am the only family left out of 2 parents and 6 siblings. And they all died. My mom died at 45. My brother died at 41. My other brother died at 45. My brother died at 59. My sister was 63, 68. And my dad was 69. So, and I just buried my brother back in 2020. So now it's just me. And the funny part about it is I feel very blessed to have the network of friends and family that I do have, but sometimes just the immediate family, so that connection and when it kind of gets like, man, just basic kind of simple little things that you go through.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
But it's been a challenge. I mean, but overall, it's like I feel blessed to know that, I don't mind reaching out. I don't mind asking questions, at all, so.
I think we each need to sit back and just take a minute and realize we've all been through so much. We've all been through a lot of experiences, and there's still a lot of new people that are coming up that are newly transplanted that have no clue of the obstructions and the difficulties that we get through and how we've managed to work our way through our lives. And I find either in a support group or when I'm at the hospital talking to patients, they love to hear the story because they have the same story inside that they're afraid to tell anyone. They think that they're odd. They have those weird dreams. They get the shakes. They miss the dialysis and they need someone to speak to. And I think it makes us all very uniquely qualified to do it. And that's what's so important about getting together and maybe getting fired up enough to go out and help those people get
Oh,
through
yeah.
that day.
I
Because
mean,
it turns out to be a great life afterwards.
oh yeah. I mean, the thing is, I've always been a community advocate on so many levels. By me going through it, I can take the information back to other people and share it with them. You know, so I'm always in tune and open-minded about everything else, because I've had my share of challenges over my lifetime, and I still feel very, very blessed to be here despite it all. You know, it's like I tell people I've been through a lot of stuff. I got shot in the head when I was 20. They robbed me. I've been living with HIV since 1985. Gallbladder removal, prostate cancer, cancer-free, and now this. I said, you know what? Just bring it. I'm good. I can take it. But I think
Kevin, I'm going to tell you the same thing I told Monette. You're stronger than you think.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, absolutely. I think that's the whole key too, is that's why I'm always putting my story out there for people to hear it, because they need to see I'm no different than anybody else. Trust me, I'm not. Yeah, I'm really not. But it's like people just need to simply know that there's somebody else outside of them. So I agree with you 155% on that one. So.
Yeah, you've had some road there. I remember when Marty was getting transplanted, and he was a surprise. We went in on a Thursday and he was transplanted on Tuesday. We had no advanced knowledge of any kind of, physical issues. But I just remember his surgeon saying after the transplant and during recovery, like not to get too overly optimistic, because it's really like one step forward and two steps back. And that kind of sounds negative, but that's kind of the way it was. You have the nerve issue. He had feet issues. He had eye issues. There was always some other little thing creeping up, and it's a little discouraging. You feel a little deflated, but you do the thing. You're going to your doctor. You do the things you need to do. You work through it, and it ends up going away over time, and you kind of get to the end of the road. But I just kind of always kept that in my mind, one step forward, two steps back. And it just kind of kept me, from getting like hysterical or crazy. So,
one of the funny things is that most of my friends know me as I'm the one they go to. So what is a go-to? So it's been interesting, because when I was in the hospital, I was still on the phone and talking to people, and people said, you must know an awful lot of people. And I said, well, I kind of do. And I said, they're always kind of concerned about me, but they said that you see the best attitude. I said, been through all I've been through, you better have a good attitude, and a tough one too.
Right. Well, you do. I think that makes a huge difference, your attitude. And obviously you're an upbeat, you're dealing with it. So you're going to get through it all. But congratulations on your transplant. I'm glad you don't have to do the dialysis anymore.
I feel
Glenn,
so
thank you.
Because, I felt so blessed because, like I said, a friend of mine, he's going to the hemodialysis, and I just had the peritoneals. I mean, I was trained to a machine for 10 hours. I just stayed there the entire time, so just getting off and coming back to it. But I got through it. It wasn't easy. Someday a little frustrating, but I got through it, and you will.
Right.
Well,
Marty,
I know you're running close for time, so I'll try to make this quick, but I'm 25-year transplant 3 times.
Wow.
I want to thank Faith for making the best presentation by a social worker that I've seen in those 25 years.
Wow.
Thank you.
I'm a lecturer at postgraduate studies at USC for social workers. My main subject is how and why to run a support group. And I want to thank Gwen also for her advice about the importance of talking to someone who's been through it before. Because for me, I had the unique circumstances that I had been through it before. And believe me, the second time through was dramatically different in every respect, spiritually, financially, mentally, emotionally, physically, socially, professionally, personally, every way. And because you've been through it before, you know much better how to deal with it. And so many issues were brought up today, it gets back to one of the things that I try to emphasize in my work. And, it's not only death and fear and anger, but the other big issue that we don't think about in a process like this is loss of control, which Faith touched on a number of times.
Yep.
But it applies to almost every situation that she walked us through. It's identifying what you truly control and identifying what you truly do not control. Accept what you don't control, go with the flow, and take responsibility for what's going to happen. And you will rebuild your life. Maybe for all the wrong reasons you're there, but you can rebuild your life.
Thanks, Robert.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, that's it.
Yeah, thank you, Faith. Thank you, group.
Yeah, we want to thank everyone for attending today. It was great to see everyone. Gwen, Vicky, Mike, Robert, it's good to see all of you. Faith, thank you so much for your energy this morning.
Yeah, Milton, we haven't seen
Yeah,
you
Milton,
forever.
it's good
Where
to
you
see you,
been?
Milton. Good to
I've been
see ya.
signing on, but my schedule has just been conflicting. But today I told everybody I'm getting on.
Well, it's really good seeing you. It's been so long. I still have that picture of you with our T-shirt on. You were
Yeah.
modeling our T-shirts. So I saw that the other day, made me think of you.
And I
Well,
still
I want to
got-
remind everyone to check out our website, www.triomaryland.org. All the sessions that we do on Saturday are now posted on the YouTube channel, excluding today's, which will be on within the week. I want to remind everyone to go on and register for the conference. It's going to be great. We have 9 speakers this year, nice, fresh thoughts. Check out our Facebook and Twitter. Please like us on Facebook. And we like to wish everyone a safe and remainder to your summer vacations. And take care. And once again, Faith, thank you for getting on with us this morning.
Thank
Yes.
you.
Thank you.
Go to a beautiful day. Go do something fun.
Yes, I
Send
talked
us
to.
an email. Tell us what you did. Have some fun today.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a
Bye-bye.
great rest of the summer.
Bye-bye.